meteorologist Chase Jones.
Well, if you know that there's pleasant weather going on somewhere else, you know there's extreme weather going on in a different part of the country. Now, we're on our way up into those 80s, but somewhere else along the west coast, they're forecasted to see about 100 inches of snow. Now, did the math behind this, went ahead and took a look at some of the atmospheric conditions. A couple years ago, they saw about 30 feet of snow, and yeah, it's looking like 100 inches up in the near region of Northern California. Now, what does that mean for us here in the Concho Valley? Warming all the way into those 80s, and then right behind it, we're going to drop 10 degrees all the way back down into those 70s. Now, the temperatures over the last 24 hours giving us a good idea of what we can expect. Now, we stayed in those 50s all day yesterday, pushed up into those 60s after watching those thunderstorms push out of the way. Winds really picked up, and we're dropping all the way back down into those 50s. Now, by tomorrow, still seeing some of those breezy conditions, and we're going to make our way up into those 70s. By the weekend, up into those 80s, but those winds will die down. 51 in San Angelo right now. Everybody else in a combination of lower 50s, upper 40s across the entire area, getting a good idea of where those low-lying areas are. 51 in Sterling City, 51 down there in Junction, 48 in Ozona, 54 in Coleman, 6 degrees across the entire Concho Valley, but it's uneven because of the uneven terrain across the entire area. Now, dew points relatively dry from yesterday where we were up near that saturation point. Dew points way down there in those 20s, if not still holding on to those teens, while the humidity indices have gone up about 10% across the entire region. So we're close together as far as dew points and as far as humidity indices, as well as temperatures. So when we're looking at the moisture content and the moisture tracker, keeping our eye really on the atmospheric river off the west coast, that concentration of blue is going to be a fire hose. So those fires will definitely be out, but then we're going to get an idea of how much sort of the probability of seeing a landslide, and then what will that turn into as it makes its way over the Rocky Mountains and into the Concho Valley before it heads off east, and we'll see how much damage it does. Now, upper level pattern showing a good idea of this ridging that's going to push us up into the 80s. We have a good idea of this cutoff low. That's where all that snow is going to make its way in. Now, we're looking at the Eastern Pacific high pressure system and the Bermuda high pressure system working together to keep most of these storms to the north, but we're watching the increase in the upper level jet stream to see it pushing a lot of this moisture across the Rocky Mountains and keeping it out of the Concho Valley. Unfortunately, we want to see more of that moisture here in this region. When we're looking at the water vapor imagery, this is a huge pocket of dry air pushing all the way down, getting a good idea of how strong those winds are today. Here's that fire hose that's setting up off the west coast. That's a whole lot of snow making its way over the Rocky Mountains, and that's going to warm us up all the way into those 80s. Severe weather outlook really just sliding off towards Louisiana, and then we take you down to the surface, getting a good idea of how strong that rotation is as the central pressure system is hovering around the panhandle. That's where all those winds are making their way in from. Off the west coast, you can see all those cold weather advisories, but we're looking at the west coast of California as they're kicking off a lot of those winter weather alerts, as well as some of those flooding in those low-lying areas. Futurecast is going to show you absolutely nothing here in the Concho Valley, but this goes all the way to Sunday. Just take a good look off the west coast. That's constant snow. Still snow. It's Saturday into Sunday. Still snow. That's a whole lot of snow all across, even into Wyoming. Down here in the Concho Valley, just going to be beautiful all the way up into those 80s. Somebody let Brian know it's going to be okay to go outside and enjoy himself. So tonight, down into those 40s, still holding on to those breezy conditions. Then tomorrow into those 70s, still looking at some of those winds, but it's going to be a great weekend to get out there and enjoy it. I know Griff says there's a whole lot of basketball going on, and of course, softball and baseball. We continue to wrap up January, pushing up into those 80s. And as we kick off the first week of February, here comes that cool down that we have our eye on, all the way gently down into those 70s, while those overnight lows finally push up from those freezing levels and hang out in those mid-50s. Stay tuned. I'm over the break. You're watching KSAN News at 10.